So hello and welcome to the Action Coach Business Spotlight. So I'm Lorna McAtear, and with my husband John Bogus, we run Action Coach Cambridge. And what do? Well, we help business owners across the Cambridge region. Now today, I couldn't be more delighted because I have got Dr Max Jakobs, and he is the CEO and co-founder of Deep Mirror. So Max, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Hey, it's brilliant having you here. So listen, let's kick off. Give me some background. Tell me about Deep Mirror.
Yeah, gladly. So Deep Mirror actually has quite an interesting story, maybe compared to other Cambridge University spin-outs, which is that initially we started as a consultancy from the laboratory. So we were essentially three academics that were consulting academic laboratories on a variety of different machine learning projects. And which actually was very interesting initially because we had to hurry to set up a bank account, set up a legal entity for the company, and so on, because none of us actually ever anticipated to go into business. And then after I finished my PhD, I essentially had the question whether I would continue with the consultancy or maybe embark on an academic career. And in the end, decided that the business part seems way, way more interesting. And then the other co-founders joined the company, and we started working with this. Like, we basically stopped working so much with academics, and we started working more and more with industry partners. And then over time, got a little bit of a, let's say, a reputation for working with particular small data sets. And then, did a few more consulting projects, and now are about to launch our first product, which is essentially a software app for small molecule drug discovery.
Wow, that's really interesting, Max. So listen, tell me, how long have you been going?
So I think we incorporated actually in 2019, and I mean, say the company is quite old now. And over the first few years, we essentially were just doing work from the laboratory, right? So in my mind, it doesn't really count. And I'd say we are, like, officially now we're about 2 years old with what we are doing at the moment, because since 2 years we started hiring people, we started being full-time with the company, and that's a way better, let's say, timeline.
Okay, so you're based in Cambridge, right?
Yeah, based in Cambridge and London, in fact. So three of us are in London and 3 of us are in Cambridge, so we're 6 people at the moment.
Oh, 6 people, yeah.
And so I'm based in Cambridge, but I travel to London quite often. And in the long run, we might actually move the whole operations to London, because in terms of software engineering talent, London is, in my opinion, a better place to be.
But Cambridge is a great place to live.
A great place to live, yeah. Very pretty.
Yes, it certainly is. So listen, tell me then, who would be your target clients? Who's your target market?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we did a lot of work for different kinds of biopharma companies initially. And at the moment, we kind of veering in more and more on particular biopharma companies that do small molecule drug discovery. So, which is a very, very classic modality of drug discovery, but we believe that there's still a lot of avenue for improvement there. And especially since the processes by which people optimize these small molecules for treatments are very, very well defined. And we're developing software, right? So we want to build a solution that kind of fits in very easily into any sort of workflow that people might have internally. And medicinal chemists, which are the main people doing this kind of work, have been used to tools up until now, and essentially are very welcoming to using another software tool for a very particular application in their workflow. So yeah, we work mainly now target medicinal chemists at small molecule drug discoveries for optimizing these chemicals that they're working with to build better drugs, essentially.
Fantastic. So listen, how did you get into this, Max?
I never really thought actually that I would go into business, because I was very dead set on an academic track, and I never interacted with entrepreneurship throughout the whole of my PhD, which, looking back, I would probably say I would have done differently. Like, maybe look a little bit outside of your career prospects or career ideals from time to time. And yeah, essentially, I just feel like working in academia, you work as a very, very lone warrior most of the time because you're only really valued on your individual output, whereas de facto most of the stuff happens in teams, but it's just not acknowledged, right? Whereas outside of academia in a company, you actually can just work as a team, and it's fine to work as a team because everybody just works for the same entity, which is in our case the mirror. So I found that much, much more appealing, the idea of actually dividing and conquering, and unless you have to do everything yourself and everything imperfectly, which in academia can sometimes be a bit harrowing.
Okay, so thinking about when you were growing up, Max, what was it that you wanted to do?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, definitely I wanted to be a theoretical physicist, like just working with equations on the chalkboard. That was my big dream. And I guess over time I realized that, first of all, theoretical physics is, I mean, you can only build nice equations when you have good experimental results. So you need experimental work, and you need to design the experimental work to figure out what is happening. So I kind of had to abandon this over time. And yeah, and then as I mentioned in the last question, over time also realized that maybe academia is anyways not the right place for me because I actually want to work in teams and less as a guy standing in a room drawing on a chalkboard by myself. So yeah, very different now than it used to be, I imagine.
Okay, so thinking about you know, the sort of issues that you've had sort of in life and business, or any issues that you've had in life and business, you know, what would you say you know, has been the biggest one that you've overcome?
That was definitely the transition because I imagine as an academic, I was maybe a little bit arrogant about the idea of transitioning into business because you would think, oh, I already conquered the natural laws. How difficult would it be to set up a business and manage people? And I think I actually gave a talk about this a few days ago because in the end, I think that was much, much harder than I thought. And in particular, in some ways, science or academia was a bit easier because the laws you study are kind of like natural laws, don't change. Whereas in business, you kind of have to work with imperfect information. You have to work with people that are sometimes a bit unpredictable. And you have to make decisions on all these, let's say, all these situations where you don't really know if you have all the knowledge needed for that decision yet or not. So you're always a bit like it's always a bit unclear. You can't use the scientific method to fully probe anything. So like the difference between, I guess, like thinking stuff through very logically all the time, methodologically, and then having to rely on gut-based decision making from time to time when running a company, that was, I guess, really, really difficult in the beginning.
Okay, so Max, are you saying that business isn't an exact science then?
Not really, no.
No, do you know,
I think it's good to add more scientific method to it and like explore your options and also measure outcomes in a scientific manner in business. But in the end, you always have to make a decision once you don't have all the information yet. And that's maybe the hard part.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true, and it's interesting because I often come across people that have started business because they're great at what they do. You know, they've got a great product or a great service, but that doesn't mean they're going to be successful at business. You have to learn to be successful in, you know, in business as well.
Yeah, we always say that you have to sell stuff as well, not just have like a nice technology that is kind of cool, because that almost doesn't really matter so much. I remember once talking to a mentor of mine, and I was talking about the technology a lot and like how it's tricky to like maybe like validate it and show that it's great. And at some point he just said, "Oh, Max, you're gonna solve all that technology stuff. Like that's easy. Like the hard stuff is the people afterwards because they will always change. They will always have different opinions. They always surprise you, and you have to kind of manage that. Like just saying there's like a certain benchmark at which the tech should be is kind of easy, and then people kind of manage to like do it. But managing the people that do all this stuff is very, very difficult.
It was
And then you have
interesting.
to sell the tech.
And the thing is, you know, your passion and your vision will go a great part of the way to, you know, to selling as well. So thinking, Max, about your sort of life and, you know, business so far, what's been your biggest learnings?
Biggest learnings. I imagine the most difficult one that I always also then struggle with, but I think it's kind of like settled now, is really the idea of you basically have to abandon the idea of you just focusing on the tech and really trying to figure out what actually adds the most value to other companies and your customers. Since we are a service provider, you cannot just say, ooh, our technology is great and it has all these performance indicators. You really have to figure out how do people use it and what are they going to do with it. So very much less of a like moving from this maybe also more scientific and academic focus on the technology and how it like performs really well to, okay, what can actually be a product that maybe is powered by this technology over here, but actually delivers some sort of value to a customer. And this transition, yeah, that was very, very hard to figure out, because as a consultancy, you can just sell tech, right? You can just provide individual services for people. But if you then want to sell a product, you really have to figure out, okay, what repeatedly gives people value in a software product. And that is, yeah, I think an ongoing learning in our company.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to find out what it is that people want and making sure that you know, you deliver what it is they want.
Yeah,
So.
also they will lie to you, right? So if you talk to them and you ask them a question like, oh, would you like this? They'll be like, oh yeah, sure. But they won't really think about it. You're not allowed to show them anything. You just have to ask them always like, oh, what would you like? And then if many people like tell you the same answer, then you can be sure that they like this thing that, yeah, you have maybe already. But you have to really watch out with leading questions there. I think there's a book that I once read, is like Talking to Your Mom or something like that, which is basically about this, like your mom will never try to be negative to you. So do most people. They don't want to be negative to you. So you should never try to ask questions where they almost have to oppose you. They're like, oh, isn't that a great idea? And then, I mean, rarely somebody will say, no, it's a shit idea. And if you find these people, I mean, you should keep them close, right? But your mom will definitely not tell you it's a shit idea. So you have to always talk to people as if you give them the option to tell you it's a bad idea by not maybe selling it as your idea at this stage. Yeah.
That's really funny. Of course, if you have a coach, you know, they'll tell you, you know, they'll tell you if they don't think your idea is good, but there's not many people out there will tell you. It's interesting, you know, because the secret really is asking the right questions and not giving people an option to give you yes, no answers, because really what you're doing, Max, is you're providing a solution to somebody's problem. So it's making sure that you're asking the right questions to find out what their problem is, to then, you know,
yeah,
provide
exactly.
them with a solution.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where the like working with people actually comes in. And figuring out exactly how to put together the right questions to make people give you the answers that you actually require for your problem. And we did that a lot over the last 2 years, effectively. I think now we're in the state where we kind of figured out one product, actually two, at this stage that we can build and deliver to our customers.
So thinking back to your mom, you've mentioned your mom there. You know, was your mom an inspirational figure for you, or you know, who comes into your mind, you know, when you sort of think of inspiration and success, and why?
I mean, you already kind of primed me with my mother there, so I'll just take her. No, I think she had quite a successful life, and maybe not in the traditional sense, but I still respected a lot. Like she basically raised like 3 kids, a lot by her own, and had to hold on a almost full-time position at the same time, and still managed to build like a great life for herself and her family. So I think that if that's not success against adversity, then I don't know what.
Okay, so what?
And I think sometimes even building a startup might be a walk in the park in comparison.
Or to raising 3 children, maybe.
By yourself and against societal and monetary adversity. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Max, what does success look like for you?
That's actually quite interesting because, again, with the transition between academia and business, because in academia, it was always very hard to ascertain like what a successful project is, because in the end, people would just say, "Oh, that's actually really interesting. Yeah, very interesting results, and here you go, and like maybe you get some more funding and so on and so on." But in business, it's kind of clear, right? If somebody pays for something, it's a good product and it's a successful project. So I guess it's nice to be able to finally quantify like a successful launch or a successful idea in this way, where once it boils down to it, if people are willing to pay for something, that is what success looks like. It's not the fundraising that you make. Like, you can always get money into the company by telling all kinds of wild stories. But if somebody is actually willing to put down, a company is willing to put down the money that they earned the hard way for your product, that is what success would look like. Yeah.
Okay, so thinking then about the future of Deep Mirror, what do you see the future? What does that look like? And do you see any challenges?
Lots of challenges. So Deep Mirror is on I think, a very interesting trajectory, because what we essentially are trying to build is what we now call the infrastructure of learning in the life science industry, which means that we want to really be there for our customers whenever they need to learn from their experimental results to make better decisions in the future. And in a way, what that means is we'll have to build many different flavors of maybe a similar product for many different applications in the life sciences, be it from optimizing small molecules for drug discovery, optimizing bioreactors to produce better cells for gene and cell therapy, or even going all the way to more novel modalities such as mRNA therapies, like the recent COVID vaccine. All of these processes are getting more and more formalized and can thus be more and more optimized. And we kind of want to build the infrastructure that supports all that, because companies that start out don't necessarily have any big, let's say, computational like teams or infrastructures yet. And instead of paying several £million for building their own teams, it might be easier to just pay much less for a software solution that we want to provide for many different, like all the different applications in the life sciences. So a long road ahead, because for each of these products, there are different requirements and different customer research you have to do. But I think it's a very, very, very interesting goal. And we see more and more companies that in this sector try to essentially build software solutions that scale across different customers and add value with different companies at similar stages.
Okay, that's really interesting. So, I mean, I know that you're not, you're sort of 3 years into your business, but what advice would you give your younger self based on your experience today?
I guess definitely to consider like veering off the academic path a bit earlier, because I think sometimes I regret that during my PhD I didn't quite build the network that I then had to build afterwards in the more private sector and especially also fundraising sector. So I kind of had to move really quickly on that after the PhD once I realized I wanted to do this. And it would have been good to have like a head start already early on, maybe consider this trajectory in all honesty early on. And I think that's also maybe a piece of advice I would give to anyone right now, which is that it almost seems like that anyone who has an idea now that is interesting will get the chance to do it, like if they just pitch it right. And I think everybody should at least try once, because I mean, there's a lot of funding around for any sort of project that might lead to any sort of interesting outcome. And if you fail in doing that, it doesn't really matter, because you learned a lot in doing it. And it's in a way, actually very low risk. I think looking back, I almost think an academic career is way higher risk than starting a startup, to be honest. Because in a startup, you learn skills that you might use again later. Whereas with an academic career, you're putting a lot of risk in trying to become a professor. And if you fail, you might not have learned much for the private sector.
That's really interesting, and I totally agree with what you're saying, Max. You know, sometimes the best way to learn stuff is to, you know, I was going to use the term fail, but you know, is you know, there's no such thing as failure. There's just learning experiences. You know, and sometimes the more learning experiences you get is really kind of what forms you sort of in life and going forward. So, you know, everything's an opportunity to learn.
Yeah, definitely. And like sometimes you just have to jump at it as well. I remember a friend of mine who runs a company once interviewed the very senior role and then asked that role, oh, why that person, why would you not start your own company at this stage? And then the interviewee just said, I mean, the interview, she was like, I think mid-40s and like very accomplished career already. And then she just said, oh, I don't think I have I'm lacking the experience. And I guess at some point you just have to do it, right? You don't ever have the right experience, and nothing really prepares you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm no spring chicken, you know, and I'm still learning. You know, I think somebody said to me the other day, when you stop learning, then that's it, game over. You know, you've always got to be learning.
Yeah, change is great, right?
Absolutely.
Keep changing things.
Yeah, it would get boring otherwise, wouldn't it? So listen, just
before
we finish, Max, is there anything else that you want to share, you know, with people watching this about Deep Mirror? Anything that you're working on, or just anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think, as I mentioned in one of the previous questions, was that we are now gearing up to launch our app for small molecule hit to lead optimization, which particularly targets medicinal chemists working out there on optimizing small molecule compounds. And we're looking for beta testers, so people that just test the app and give us feedback on it. So if anybody who works in the lab as a medicinal chemist is watching this, would be great if you could drop me an email at max@deepmirror.ai. So yeah, if you're interested, just reach out.
Well, there you go. And you know what? I was just going to wrap up. So how do people get in touch with you? So email at max@deepmirror.ai, yeah?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. And
straight to me.
straight to you. And is there any other way that people can get in touch? Or is that the best way, just to email?
Just connect on LinkedIn as well.
Okay, and what I'll do with the write-up that I give this video, I'll put in a link to your website and put your email address on there as well, Max. Yeah, listen, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
Always welcome.